Now all three of these mics just miking each individual drum. Now, just the overhead mic, I've had several people over the years ask me about miking conga drums. So I'm going to give a couple of my ideas, and that's really all they are. They're my opinions based off of my own experiences, both live and in the studio, although most of this video has to do with the studio recording. There's a difference between what you're doing live and what you're going for in the studio. The first thing when it comes to miking congas and getting a good sound, one thing that I've noticed is sometimes it comes down to, or when people are asking, it comes down to the actual drum and the room and the player. If you have all of that well, the signal itself, the thing that you're recording, how you're playing, if that's well, you don't have to have the greatest microphones. You don't have to have the greatest equipment. As long as it's clean, it's probably going to sound good. Now, that being said, the room changes a lot. But before we can even get into all of that, we want to talk about how we're having the drums tuned. Now, I know that doesn't come down to like actually miking the congas, but a lot of times I get questions based on people that are developing or beginning. So I want to start on the beginning level. You may be a more intermediate, and I'm going to get into some of that with the actual miking angles and whatnot, but let's start with tuning. Now, you hear where this drum is tuned, or these drums. There's 3 conga drums. That's the middle drum, the highest drum, and the lowest drum. All right? Now, because it's winter time, it's a little drier in my house, although I do have the heater running, so the air is being filtered, so it's a pretty good, even though it's dry, really dry outside, it's not too dry inside, but it's still affected a little bit by the weather, especially being by a window. Now I have the heat going, so it's not too much, but it's not, I can tell that the drums are a little bit more taut than they were a little bit ago when I tuned them. And because it's skin, they're being affected by that. So first things first, when you're talking about miking the congas, you want to think about where the drum is tuned if you're not messing with that already. Now I have 3 mics. I have a mic on each drum. The ones on the outside are pointed away from the center drum, and the one in the center is pointed in the middle. So I'm going to loosen this one on my right side. Loosen it just a little bit to get it to the sound that I want, and this is purely a by ear type of thing, right? And I just think that they're a little bit close together as far as intervals are concerned, and I want them to be a little bit farther apart. So I'm gonna just kind of loosen this up a little. There we go. Okay, now it's becoming a little more melodic to me. Now, what I tend to do is when I'm miking and I'm getting ready for a session, is I will listen to the actual song that I'm going to record on, record and play a little bit, get my levels. Once I've gotten my levels right and I have everything mic'd the way I want it, then I will play a little bit, and then I'll go back and listen on the monitors, the speakers, as well as on the headphones, because sometimes what you hear in the room and what you hear coming back through the speakers may be a little different, and it may change the way that you're going to approach the mic techniques and the tuning of the drum. I'm still not completely sold on that tuning, and why this is important is sometimes when we are miking the drums and we're not getting the sound we want, sometimes it's just a matter of maybe the tuning that we don't like. But all right, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. Just so happens that before I started recording, I left them where they were tuned already. But let's talk about the mics themselves. We have two Shure SM57s on the smallest drum and the middle-sized drum. Then I have a Sennheiser 421 on the larger drum. That's just what I've been using forever, and it's been working, so I felt no need to really change it. Perhaps in the future I will. I don't know. But overhead, which is also what I'm using for my vocal mic here, I have a discontinued CAD mic. They no longer make this, but it has a vacuum tube inside of it, and it's a really nice mic for percussion. Records very well, and usually it's pointed a little more towards my mouth here, but usually I would have it pointed a little farther down towards the drums, but not right towards the center, because it's almost overhead towards where the center drum is, but it has this type of shape that it's going to catch, right? Even though it has something in the center, because it's a condenser mic, it's going to kind of come out a little bit. And each mic is different. It has its each microphone has its own way of capturing. Try not to use too many technical terms here, but I'm overshooting the drums just a little bit. So if you point like a laser from the center of the diaphragm, the middle of the mic, and it's not going straight to the drum, it's kind of overshooting a little bit. I'm just trying to get an area. Now, it's about 1.5 feet away from the drums for this room, because the room is really what you're tuning to as well as you're recording in the room. Because of the room, I've just found this is where I've had the mic. It sounds great to where I like it. It's pretty even, and for the overhead mic, this is usually where I have it. And I'm approximating from the center of the drum. It's probably about 7/14, yeah, about 1.5 feet away from. I probably wouldn't go much higher than that for overhead. That's just this room, and that's me. The other mic that I have is an SM7B on the other side of the room. That's my main mic for podcasting, recording percussion effects, and just recording stuff quickly. That mic is always ready. It's always live. It's always ready to record, and it does pretty well for a room mic. When I'm recording in the studio, that's something that I love to do, is also give the client an option with a room mic. It gives something a little extra to the recording. Now, so we have 4 microphones in total. Now, I think personally I can get away with recording all of this with just one mic, but if I'm giving this to a client, I want them to have the option to lower or raise the volume of one of the drums, or maybe even take one of the mics out, because it might sound better with one of them not there, or maybe just one of the mics. So with each one being mic'd, now you can control the volume of each one in particular. Now the tricky thing about that is when they're so close together and they're not really close to the drum itself, is that you're gonna get mic bleed. So even though I play this drum over here, if I play this drum, you're still going to get some bleed of that sound into these other drums, but it's going to be a lot more. Hopefully, what I'm trying to do is have it close enough that it's going to be much louder on this one, so that even though there's bleed over on these other drums, it's not too dramatic. And plus, it's much more on this, so that if I feel this is too hot in the recording, this drum, and it's not even with the other ones, I can lower it and it still be even across the board. Now, so that gets us into the distance and where the placement of the microphone is. I personally, when I'm recording more contemporary and pop-like recordings, I don't want a lot of the flesh of my hand, the skin and everything on the actual drum. I don't want these sounds as much. The shh and the t-t-t, that's the attack, the actual skin. And the way I get away with that is pulling the mic back a little bit further. It's about 7-8 inches away from the center of the drum. So this gets us into the distance of the microphone itself. I'm about 8 inches or so from the center of the drum to the microphone itself. And instead of it pointing straight to where my hand is landing on the drum, which would get a little more attack, it's off of the bearing edge, more pointing towards the actual edge of the drum. And if I want it even less, then I might actually, instead of pointing towards the drum, I might point it more towards the side of the drum. But if I want more contact, like more of this or all of that, if I'm doing a contemporary pop like album and it's not really a Latin type vibe, or or something that has a little more presence of the drum with all those ghost notes, then if I'm not doing that, I want a little distance from the drum, working with the room. The farther away from the drum you go, the more of the room you're gonna get. So the more maybe a little more of the tone versus the actual attack of the skin itself. So I go a little bit further back, a little more pointed towards the edge. If I want more attack, I'll point towards where my hands are making contact, come up a little bit higher, pointed a little bit more down towards where my hands are, and that will give me more attack. So depends on what you're really going for. When I want more of the slap to pop, then there's two things I'm thinking about: how I have the drum tuned, how I'm articulating and actually playing the note. But if I want to capture that a little bit more, then it's mic placement. I may use a lot more of the overhead coming down, and if I want that pop to breathe a little bit, because the overhead mic, not only its direction overhead, but its distance from the drum allows me to get a little bit more of the air, right? And of course I can kind of EQ that a little bit, and then there's the issue of EQ, and then I can mix that sound, add some effects, right? Add some reverb or delay and kind of draw that resonance out a little bit. But the thing you want to do is get it right at the signal as much as possible. Get it right at the source, so that you're playing your articulation and the mic placement. One of the best ways to do this is have somebody play the drum while you move your ear around. Don't let them play too loud, and then place where you think it sounds good. Place the microphone right there. Use your ear like it is a microphone. It's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten when it comes to just recording, from talented engineer Alex Anders, Eric Myers from Sonic Boost Studio, and Troy Henry. These guys are incredible. And one of the things that they would often tell me is just use your ear. Use your ear like it's like your ear like it's a microphone and it's on a stand and you're moving it around in the room, and you're listening. If you think it sounds good from where you're standing there, throw a mic there and test it out. So sounds very basic and fundamental, and it is, but it's old wisdom, right? And it's worked for me. Again, you want to record though where it's at and listen back and see if that will work for you. You're working with the room. All right, now, so we have the positions of the mic, how close they are. That's going to affect it, especially where it's pointed. Is the mic up over you and facing your hands, or pointing where your hands make contact with the drum, where you're going to get more contact of the actual drum, more attack? Or is it farther away? The farther away the microphone is, the more of the room you're going to get, because it's farther away. So now you're making space between you, the source, the signal, and the microphone. So you're capturing the way all the reflections bouncing around in the room. So sometimes if you want to isolate just that instrument, you got to get a little bit closer to it. But by doing that, you're going to get less of the resonance from the drum. It's not going to breathe as much. It might be, and it depends, but it might be a drier, what we call a drier sound, right? So if you want a little bit more air, you want it to breathe a little bit, the tone to come out with a little more resonance and get a little more of the transients, the other overtones and sounds from the drum, then you might want to move the microphone back a few inches. I wouldn't go farther than a foot or so. I wouldn't go too far back away from the drum. It just really depends on what you're going for. If you're going for a live open sound, then you might just want that one drum, or you might want to be a little bit farther back from the mic. I don't know. It depends. You got to experiment. And then we have where they're pointed, if they're pointed away from each other. Now, often I'll see microphones just pointed straight at the drum, but if we're in a pretty small room, or we're trying to isolate the drum as much as possible, but we don't want stuff to get in the way of our hands, then we may want to angle the mic a little bit away from each other. I've found personally with these microphones in this room, with the mic cables and the preamps that I'm using, that it helps to angle the outside drums, still pointed at the drum, but away from the center. That way it's just this drum on the right, it's just this drum on the left, and then I can go straight through and I'll have this drum in the center. Then I have my overhead mic to help balance all of that out. And then I have my room mic to give it a little bit extra sound, especially with a smaller room. It's going to be a little bit tighter. If I want a little bit more air, and there's a place, having a room mic when recording also may help if you have a certain place that you record away from the drums. It sounds cool. It has its own reverb. It might be unique to the room, and the client may not have that. They may be able to EQ and get all of that, but now you can give them something that they can work with right away. It could be a hallway outside of the room. It could be inside the room on the other side. It could be pointed towards a wall. Just experiment with something. At the end of the day, you're trying to make your sound. That's what I think. What it comes down is something that's unique, but you're solving solutions too, right? So for the client, the producer, whoever it is that you're recording for, if that's what you're doing. If you're recording for yourself, again, you're just trying to get a sound that you like. So does it sound good to you? That's what matters. All right. The microphone cables that I'm using are Mogami Gold cables or something that's comparable, a nice cable. You don't want to cheapen the piping of the microphone, right? It's kind of Eric Myers, a friend of mine and very talented engineer, has often likened it to plumbing. If you have good equipment, but then your the plumbing is really dirty, the piping is really dirty, then you might have clean water you're piping it through, but then it gets really dirty on the other side. So you want to make sure that you have a good microphone cables, clean. They don't have to be the most expensive, but you want everything that you want to try to get as much dirt out of the way, right? As much boundaries out of the way. So something that's clean. Again, if the source is really good, that's the drum, the player, the tuning, the room. If all of that is taken care of, then if you have halfway decent equipment, you probably will be, at least a lot better off. But now if you have all the sources fantastic, but you have average equipment, you'll probably be okay if you know how to use it, right? It's all context here. So I have these cables, and what I'm trying to do is make sure that now the source between them to the microphone preamp, okay, that's the preamp is the amplifier before we're going into our recording software or our interface, which is between our computer or module that's recording and the microphone cable or the microphone preamp. All right, it's in between. Just think about it like that. So all of this is our signal chain from the source to the microphone, all the way through the cabling, the microphone preamps, the interface, the computer, and the recording software that you're using. You're thinking about each area. And now, so that gets into when we get into the microphone preamps and how we're controlling the gain, a lot of that has to do with a good sound as well. So that's not miking per se, but that's some things that may get in the way of good miking. So you want to try to learn as much as you can about control with your gain, your input volumes, and having the least amount of what we call noise floor as possible. Every microphone preamp, but microphone preamps, equipment has its own noise that may be introduced into the recording. And if we're trying to get a clean recording, we want to know how to manage that. Some microphones, like these microphones, they have very little to no noise floor, so I don't have to worry about that. But the microphone preamps that I'm using have their own character. It's electronic equipment, so it's going to have its own sound. So depending on how much I wanted that sound, I'm going to crank the volume on that, the input volume, and that is going to allow me the input volume, the output volume. I have to play with that, and that's going to allow more of the sound of that thing into the recording. I mention that because sometimes our issue of recording and miking the congas has to do sometimes more with our playing and the way that we're recording the instrument than it does the actual, equipment that we have, how we have it configured. And just having an understanding of that helps us out. Just like having a better tone makes it where the miking becomes a little bit easier. Having the room being tuned the way you need it to be. The least amount of other extra noises that you don't want into the room. You want to just capture the sound as much as possible. All of these things are going to help when it comes to getting a good mic with the drums. All right. Now, what does it sound like then with just the overhead mic and just these here? So here's what it sounds like with just the center mic. Okay, now just the outside mic here. Just the mic on the other side here, the middle drum mic. Now all three of these mics just miking each individual drum. Now, just the overhead mic, just the overhead mic. Now all of the mics together. Center mic. Okay. Now all of the mics together with a little bit of reverb and a little bit of compression, a little bit of effects there. So this whole time it's just been pretty dry as far as effects is concerned. At the end, I added some effects. And I'm not EQing where adding any bass or changing the tone or pitch a little bit of the drums. Most of that is done with me, the tuning and the articulation, how I'm moving my hands of the actual drum. Now, all of this is the way that I had the drum placed, the microphones placed, where they're not placed where you hear a whole lot of my hand in the attack. But because there's nothing else playing and I am doing a lot of this in my style, you still are going to hear quite a bit of that. If I don't want all of that, then I don't play all of that. Instead of playing this, I play, right? Instead of here. So or I could actually bring them in a little bit closer to the bearing edge and experiment with that. You experiment with that and see how it feels. Maybe come back here, comment below, let me know. Hey, thanks for watching. If you're interested, I have a whole email newsletter where I have exclusive stuff that's not on the YouTube channel, and I may go more in depth on some of that other stuff, as well as I have an online course about congas, that is coming out with a lot of videos that I don't, or content that's not on the YouTube channel. So there's a link in the description below. Go right below this video, there's a description, and there's a link to that email newsletter below. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I'd love to have you as a part of the subscription family. All right, thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you. I'll see you soon.